Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today we have Innovia Consulting Steve Waltz, and he is going to be presenting to us today on sales coaching. And I just want to let you know that we do record our webinars, so this will be available on our website later this week for you to review, or if you'd like to share it with any other colleagues, you're more than welcome to. And if you have any questions, please type them into the questions box and we will get them called out toward the end of the webinar. And now I'll turn it over to Steve and he will start our presentation.
Thank you, Angie. Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about not reaching sales quota, using sales coaching to get you there. As Angie said, my name is Steve Waltz. I'm with the customer engagement team here at Innovia. And let's go ahead and get into the webinar. So the topic is sales coaching. So what is sales coaching? You know, it's kind of an oxymoron to answer that question, because the coaching model is based on the belief that the question is the answer. It's typical for most sales managers to want to tell salespeople what to do. And when we do that, we kind of create a world of dependency. So this whole model we're going to talk about is really to empower your sales team on being able to do their business on their own. Because what is the main responsibility of a coach? Well, their main responsibility is to help their team members improve their own problem-solving skills and find the answers for themselves. And when you do that, you create this art of possibility. So sales coaching is also the art of creating possibility. And selling is the art of creating possibility, so that they work synergistically together. When you tell somebody, you need to do this, this, and that, they get focused on that, so they get a narrow vision. When you empower them and you ask them questions on what do you know about the customer, what do you think you need to know to get there, they start getting that 10,000 foot, like the eagle soaring viewpoint, so they can see more what's available to them as far as possibilities. And that kind of leads into what is the role of a sales coach. I have 5 things listed here. And number 1 is focus on strengths. You know, there's a book out there called Strength Finders, and that's a great book if you have a chance to read it. Because the world we live in, especially kind of in sales, people tend to dwell on the negative, right, on weaknesses. And we want to focus on, what their strengths are, because everybody has their individual strengths. So if someone is strong at being a hunter versus a farmer, going after new business, or really good with the customers, but they're not as good as on administrative skills, that doesn't have to be pointed out all the time. Because one thing that always happens is, we talk about this wonderful word called quota. People understand that. They don't need to be told 3 or 4 times in a month that, hey, you're kind of lagging behind your quota. So we want to focus on strengths. Because another role of the sales coach is really to facilitate, to be a facilitator. We want to remove the roadblocks and make things easier for our team members. Right? We want to simplify the process. And something that is going to be new for some people that have never really had coaching training before is you don't need to have all the right answers. Right? Just because you are a super salesperson doesn't mean you have to have all the answers. You need to have the right questions, right? What questions you can ask. It's kind of like being a top salesperson. Over the years, I have found that the top salespeople are the ones that know how to ask good questions for the customers, so they can divulge the information that's key to their pain points and what they want to achieve. And the same thing for as a sales manager with their salesperson. Because the last 2, number 4 and 5, it gets into, sometimes it can be a little uncomfortable. Because another role of the sales coach is to really empower their people to be accountable for the success and their failure. I've said in some of my previous webinars that to be a top salesperson, you need to be the CEO of your territory. You need to be fully accountable for what goes on. Because everybody's quick to jump on the success bandwagon, but so few are going to accept the failure. Oh, that's on me. And one of the ways to do that is when you are coaching your team members along, when they know that your intent is to help them and help them grow, it makes that more easy to understand and to do. Because another role of the coach is requesting change and growth. So if you look in the dictionary, you talk about change, everybody wants you to change, but no one wants to change on their own. So we are going to try to change behavior. And when you try to do that, when they understand that you're trying to help them grow and develop and have their best interests at heart, that's going to help you in that process, because you're going to try to inform and guide them on their journey of becoming a better salesperson. Coach John Wooden, I'm here in the South Bend, Indiana office here for Innovia. He actually was one of his first coaching jobs was a high school coach here in South Bend before he went to UCLA. And if you get a chance to read his books, they're phenomenal. But he had lots of quotes, and this one really stands out for especially what we're talking about today. A coach is someone who can give correction without resentment. And some people have trouble receiving coaching, right? Because it's really the intent of it. And I think his players knew that deep down he wanted them to be the best they could be. And that's is key in developing your people. Because there are differences. Some people get these kind of messed up. So I wanted to kind of bring these up so we can understand what they both are. A coach and a mentor. So a coach basically becomes somebody that's an expert on people and personal development, right? Because as a coach, your role is to provide structure and a foundation for your team members so they can kind of self-generate the results they want on their own. And if you look at the last part of that, you want them to self-generate the results that they want on their own. Because when they own it, they put more into it. Whereas a mentor, let's say you hired somebody to kind of to follow somebody, right? The mentor is an expert in the field or industry. You maybe hired somebody in accounting or somebody in another department, right? Where they kind of follow around. They show them this is what you need to do. These are the reports. This is what this is. This is how you get this done. They're more of an internal advisor. The difference mainly between the two is that the mentor has their own approach and their own system, and they're kind of telling the person they're working with what they do. They're not taking in their own personal values or strengths of the people they mentor. They're basically having the people tailored to them. So if you want to be a top sales coach, the mindset needs to be to develop champions. So how do we develop champions as a sales manager? What I have listed here first is the shift from a spreadsheet manager to a people manager. We are all addicted to data and these wonderful Excel spreadsheets. We like to take a look at what everybody's doing. It's interesting when you have that mindset and you look at, well, this salesperson is doing these type of sales calls and just like the other one, but why is this one more effective? Well, one of the things that happens is that you're looking at past. Okay, you're seeing what they did. If you're going to be a sales coach and develop people, you need to be in the present and see what they're doing. Because some people, are just more likable, more approachable. People trust them more. They've earned it. Some people could be more aggressive and self-minded, and they just don't get the same type of response from customers. But the only way you're going to see that is if you're working with your team members out on the field. The second thing I have listed here is you need to relinquish your role of being the subject matter expert. A lot of sales managers were super salespeople, and they got promoted to sales manager, and that's awesome. But now you're responsible for your team. So sometimes if they haven't been trained on being a sales coach, they have to, for their value, they need to interject all their knowledge. And so we just need to take a step back, and there'll be plenty of times for you to interject what you know, all right? Because they understand that you're good at what you're doing. That's how you became a sales manager. And lastly, I have rule number 1, 2, and 3. Let your people do their job. Sounds simple, right? Just let your people do their job. Because hopefully in the hiring process, you hired the talent you wanted to get, define the role that they're supposed to do, and turn them loose. And one of my favorite quotes of all time is Steve Jobs here, right? It doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. You tell them what the end game is, right? What they're supposed to achieve, and they'll tell you how to get there. They'll tell you how to do it. So if you want to be in the top echelon in sales or as a sales manager, and I always use in my webinars the 80-20 rule, right? So if you want to be in that top 20 or the top 10%, The mindset is, as a sales coach, is how do I lead people to their fullest potential? Right? You want to be a leader. So you almost have to say goodbye to management, right? Because management is the act of controlling. And no one likes to be controlled. They want to know the rules of the game and what they're supposed to do in their job description. So if you want to develop people and be the leader and be the coach, you need to say hello to the development of your people. That should be primary. So your primary objective should be to make your people more valuable. This is awesome, right? When you have the mindset of how can I make you as a manager today, how can I make you better than you were yesterday? They rise to the occasion. It's less stress, it's more fun, and it's okay to have fun because you're trying to win together as a team. You know, so many managers have not been trained on how to coach people, so they like to tell them. You can think of the instance of the sales rep that's not meeting their quota. And the data shows in the year 2018 that 51 to 52% of the sales team or salespeople are not going to meet their quota. So that means half the sales managers are not going to meet their quota also, right? And what's typical in a lot of those cases is they want to consistently call the salesperson and say, hey, do you know that you're behind on your quota? You need to hit your quota. Well, I know, boss, I need to hit my quota. I need your help. Well, I'm too busy right now because I'm telling all the other salespeople that they need to hit their quota because they really don't know what to do. So that's where coaching can really play a good role, because what happens is a lot of time, since they were a super salesperson, they want to interject what they should do all the time. Do this, try this, do this. Well, what happens is you become the chief problem solver. They become dependent on you, and we don't want to become the chief problem solver. And that kind of leads us into mindset and skill set, and they're two totally different things. Everybody has their own skill set. You know, some people just naturally are better at certain things than other people. So we need to focus really on mindset, right? And the mindset of this needs to be telling people what to do, like that chief problem solver. We get in that coaching mindset. We need to ask more questions. And we're going to talk about some of the questions here in the webinar. And we need to become very consistent in our conversations and observations. And the benefit of that is when you constantly meet with your sales people, if you go on the field and work with them or you do it internally, and you're consistent, you're going to ask these key questions. Well, what did you do to get to this step, right? How did you prepare? What do you know about your customers? And then when you have the observations, you can tell them, you know, did you meet your objective? When you have consistent questions in there, they're going to start programming themselves, this is how I need to prepare before I call my account, because this is the review I'm going to have with my boss. So I want to make sure I'm kind of following that. And it's going to help them in their mind gather the information and the data that they need and help them think through the process of how they can grow their business. And the mindset should also be, is we're going to tap into each person's individual strength and individuality versus our own. And this can be a new world for a lot of salespeople and sales managers, because, you know, resiliency and all these different things that we have, an ego to keep us afloat in this world of losing 7 out of 10 times. You know, it's this thing that we have, the survival skill, that we want to just basically, you know, fight our way out. But we need to really coach our team members on figuring things out on their own, right? We need to uncover what motivates each person to create alignment with personal and company goals. And when you can create that alignment with personal goals and company goals, that is going to be very strong for your results. Because everybody wants to do a good job. And they want to help the company achieve their goals. So we need to pull out their strengths and help align those two things, and those will work synergistically together. So let's talk about things that we can change, right? We can change the behavior of ourselves. And that can be hard sometimes. I don't know if you've ever done a 360-degree survey. Those are tough, right? We get into blind spotting, things that we don't see that we think we do. And when we're told by somebody that we trust that, you know, this is a weakness, you know, that's tough. So we need to really, you know, take a step back and say, okay, how can I be a better coach? So what can you control? Well, you can control yourself, right? Because we're our biggest competitor. And when when you're on the sideline watching, that's when you need to be coaching. Because as I said before, when you interacted with your team, you need to be very consistent, right? But you also need to understand when you have every interaction or conversation with a team member, you're building trust. And trust is so important, especially in sales, right? Because if they know you have their back and you're trying to help them grow, then you are becoming a leader. And I don't know if you realize it or not, but a lot of sales managers do not realize the power they possess as a leader. The team members look up to him or her. So you need to realize that you kind of set the culture of your team too. So that's good news. Or hopefully it's good news, right? Because if it's a negative culture, you need to do this, this, and this, or you're not constantly hitting your numbers, then the culture is going to be negative. And believe it or not, in sales, when it's a positive culture, you have more positive sales. So now we want to talk about changing the behavior of others. One thing I wanted to I have on here, which is number one, is that any desired behavioral change will not stick without coaching. And what I mean by that is it's a consistent behavior. So like you're attending this webinar, or you read a book. Well, that's fantastic. That means you're trying to better yourself. But if you don't review it, you're going to lose most of it. So we're trying to basically get people to change their behavior. Okay, so one way you can do that is what I have below is a couple of questions that need to be answered, right? So they kind of get into this mind thinking. So when you're working with them and they come to you as they need help, maybe there's something going on with one of their accounts, or somebody's not getting back with them, or somebody changed positions, right? And they tell you, instead of saying, oh, really? Well, do this and this and that, we want to get away from that. We want to get into this mindset of, okay, what's going on? This is a chance to assess and gather the facts. Okay, once you kind of gather the facts, we want to get into the why. We want to cover the gap or the root cause. What caused this, right? And then we kind of get into the how. Now we're getting into the questions that we're going to ask them versus us telling them what to do. So how do you think you got here? Have you ever had situations like this before? What do you think you can do? And then by doing that, the person now really is self-generating their own answer, and then they own it. And when somebody owns it, good things happen. Because the person needs to accept and decide to make the change on their own versus you telling them, right? When a person decides on their own to change, that's when we'll start moving the needle forward, because there must be accountability. And the only way we're going to get accountability in this is if they own the process. So let's get to some low-risk coaching questions when you're working with your team members. And the first one I have here is align. So you want to align with them. Because if you ask them, is now a good time to discuss, and they tell you, well, I'm right in the middle of finishing up a proposal that's due here shortly, well, that's not going to be a good time. So you want to make sure that there's plenty of time. And when you do have that opportunity, a good question might be, are you open to exploring other ways to achieve the results you want? I think most people are going to say yes to that. And then we need to get into assess the situation, right? What have you tried so far? How have you handled a similar situation like this? So when you kind of go through this process, we want them to self-generate a solution. And here's a powerful question, right? What's your opinion on how to handle this? Well, I'm not sure. I haven't handled this before. Well, if I wasn't here, what would you do to resolve it? And if they're stumbling, this now gives you a chance to really interject your experience. What I have here, number 4, fill the gaps. You can now, you uncovered what they know and what they don't know, and maybe what they missed. Now you can kind of share your experiences and give your input. And one of the benefits of that is that you're not becoming redundant. When you're constantly telling somebody what to do, it becomes a form of redundancy, and then things are missed. So what are some good developing questions that you can ask? And I think this question here is probably one of the best questions that you can ask a salesperson and get them trained on doing, because it really forces you to think deep into each account. What do you think you need to know about every account and customer? Well, that's a good question. Well, I think we need to know who the key players are. Okay. I think we need to know their budget, what their goals are, their vision. I think we need to know who is accountable for what. See, there you go. Then they start talking about it, right? And then you kind of get into what questions would you ask when qualified that give you the information that you're trying to get. That's a good question. Well, I think I need to find out, when this project is due, what their timeline is, or, are you the key team members that's going to be making a decision? So you're starting to get them talking about what they think you need to do. And I tell you what, one of the things you can actually do, and I did this earlier this morning with my managers, we role played a call. Right? What are you going to say to the customer when you call them back? Because if you're not 100% sure, and you don't have, what's the purpose of the call, what's your objective of the call, what's your next step? Well, then you're really kind of, having a call that's pretty broad. So you really want to focus and have those conversations so they can self-generate and develop. Now this slide, I have 9 questions for post-sales call. And I don't recommend going through all these 9, and usually maybe 3, possibly 4 questions that you can ask after you're done with the sales call. And even number 1 and 2, you can ask even prior to the call, right? What'd you do to prepare for the sales call? What's your objective? And by doing that, you are now in the top 50, 60%, because over half the salespeople do not ask those questions or have a clue. They just kind of randomly call on their prospects or their accounts. And you can look as I get towards the bottom of this list, right? And these are questions that really make you think. What action did the customer commit to take? Well, I didn't really ask them for that. Well, why didn't you? What action did you commit to take? Because when you get them to commit to take steps along with you, they're taking more ownership of the process, and there's mutual ownership, right? You're holding each other accountable. And the last 2, which really I would say a lot of majority of the salespeople, sales managers miss. What are the next steps? And if they're hard to get a hold of now, and you have that person in front of you, right? Why not try to schedule a follow-up meeting? Because if they don't return emails or phone calls, it's going to be difficult. So those are questions you can have with your sales team after the sales calls. One of the things that really a question I get from sales managers is, I've tried some of these things and it's not working. Well, the people that you're dealing with must be coachable, right? We need to check our ego at the door. And, they need to be willing to ask for help. And that kind of goes into, do they trust you? Do they feel that you really got their best interest in heart? And hopefully that you're going to help them achieve it, right? And then after they ask for help, do we listen, right? Now we're kind of going outside the comfort zone for some people because we're going to give them feedback. Some people have big shoulders, some people don't. And trust. As I said earlier, we all have blind spots. We all get focused. And if you think of the top athletes, when they're performing on the field, they have coaches on the sideline that see everything that happens around them. So they got to trust you that when you're talking with them, that you're kind of seeing and you're trying to help them, maneuver through. Because we get to the last 2. This is where a lot of it stops, right? Action. Right? Are they willing to follow through on agreed upon steps? Everybody can identify issues, but it's another as far as having action. And it's like coaching. And I can tell you this, if you start implementing coaching sessions, and it depends on how often you work with your sales team, if it's weekly, monthly, if you have remote meetings, or if you actually have, work with. But I can tell you this, you need to be consistent when you have coaching sessions and buy into it. Because if you start dropping off coaching sessions, they're going to say, this was the flavor of the month. This is another thing that they just kind of went to a seminar or webinar and they wanted to do. The mindset needs to be, okay, if it doesn't work out because the time, you need to reschedule your coaching session or review with your sales team member, because it is important. Granted, I've had people tell me, Steve, I'm too busy. Well, that's understandable. But if you do this correctly, and you coach your salespeople and you make them more dependent on themselves so they can self-generate and do this, they'll reach you less. You actually will have more time. Okay, so that falls into the action step, because the last one is progress, right? Because as we make progress, we are now be able to put into practice into action. One thing I get asked, or I've seen with a lot of companies, is they have great sales training programs and they have great sales trainers, and that's wonderful. But sales training doesn't develop champions. Leaders do. Because in sales training, some people are going to take what they learned in sales training, they're going to run with it. Well, that sounds good, I'm going to run with that. Some people are going to take it and say, I might use it a couple times, see what happens. And then you got to get into a lot of people like, that doesn't work for me. Where coaching is a developing process. You know, you're not a one and done. It's a mindset. It's how you deal and interact with your team. So if I talked with other members of your team, because, you know, when I talk with sales managers or salespeople, most salespeople and managers feel that, I do a good job of coaching. Oh, you do? Were you ever trained on it? Well, no. So tell me how you coach. Well, I basically tell them to do this, this, and this. Okay, well, you just said you told them. You know, the goal of coaching is to help them develop where they can self-generate and do it on their own. Oh, because statistics have shown only 30%, and that's at the high end, of sales managers have been trained on how to coach a salesperson. And there was a recent poll of 1,000 senior execs, and they stated that there was adequate training for their salespeople, but little or no training for newly promoted sales managers. It seems like for some reason, when a salesman is promoted to a sales manager, a lot of small to medium-sized businesses, even some of the larger companies, just think that guy knows what to do. This person is in charge of your team, right? To generate new sales and to fill the pipeline up and then to work the pipeline. And they haven't received training on how to coach somebody, you know. And what happens is you kind of go from, you know, you created a seller who's now a super seller because he or she is a sales manager. And then they kind of go into that chief problem solver mode where I can fix it for you. And then what happens is you create this dependent sales force. These people are reliant consistently to have their manager fix their problem. So that's not coaching, but that's kind of probably how a lot of companies, you know, are really set up on their sales manager and their sales team, and that's unfortunate. So I winded down here. I hope that everybody that happened to be on this got something out of it. And Angie, I'm going to open it up for questions.
We do have a question, Steve. Is there a good resource or book you would suggest on coaching salespeople?
I would say there's a lot of resources out there. On YouTube, there's plenty, and this will obviously be out on YouTube. But there's a book I would highly recommend, and a lot of the stuff I kind of talked about on here is from a couple of different books. But the one I would recommend is called Coaching Salespeople into Sales Champions, and that's by Keith Rosen. And he does a phenomenal job on breaking down on how to coach salespeople. So, any other questions, Angie?
Nope, not at this time.
Well, I wanted to thank everybody for making time to be on this, and hopefully feel that they got a couple of things they could take back and do as far as improving on how they interact and coach their salespeople.
Thank you, Steve, for the informative information on sales coaching.
You are welcome.
So I would like to invite you all to visit our website and check out all of our upcoming events that we have going on. We do have Equisys next week presenting on how to become paperless and achieve a fast ROI. And we have a couple of Innovia employees who will be doing webinars. Joseph Gress will be doing his webinar on the 21st, and he'll be talking about nav upgrades. And on the 22nd, we have John Grant, who will be giving us an overview on NAV reordering policies. So if you're interested in any of those webinars, we encourage you to register for them. And we have our customer conference coming up on April 18th and 19th. It'll be held at the Chula Vista Resort and Conference Center in the Wisconsin Dells. It is a free event for you to attend, so we encourage you to register for that. We'd love to meet you. We have many ISVs who will be presenting, and we have all those updated on our conference website page. So if you'd like to check that out, we encourage you to do so. Just click on conferences on the top of our webpage, and you'll be able to see all the information on our conference. Well, again, thank you everyone for attending this webinar, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. Have a great day, everyone.